Tomie. Tomie was the manga that Junji Ito made his debut with back in 1987, submitting the short story to Monthly Halloween, where it won an honorable mention in the Kazuo Umezu Prize, which would allow the story to be published in the magazine, where it immediately became immensely popular, and would be serialized in the magazine until the publication itself eventually ceased. Tomie would then continue outside of Monthly Halloween, with the latest installment releasing in May of 2024 at the time of making this video, resulting in a total of 25 chapters, making it the longest running Ito work to date. As far as what Tomie is about, it follows the titular character in various one-off stories, although there are multiple chapters that follow an overarching plot. Regardless of any connections between chapters, one thing always remains the same. Tomie is meant to be an extremely beautiful teenage girl. So beautiful, in fact, that any man who comes in contact with her will develop an immense obsession with her. This obsession soon grows uncontrollable, resulting in the man or men in question needing to kill and dismember Tomie as soon as possible. But even after being brutally murdered and chopped to pieces, Tomie always finds a way to come back. Uzumaki. Easily Ito's most popular and critically acclaimed work, Uzumaki follows a teenager named Kirie Goshima, her boyfriend Soichi Saito, their families, and the entire population of their town, Kudozu, as everyone living within said town is slowly subjected to various otherworldly events involving spirals, whether it be through obsession, complete transformations, or worse. The curse of the spiral will eventually twist them all. Uzumaki was serialized in the magazine Big Comic Spirits from 1998 to 1999, totaling 20 chapters upon its completion. Ito was inspired to write Uzumaki from his desire to tell a story about the people living in a very long terraced house, the idea of which was inspired from the similar house he lived in as a child. Upon trying to find a way to create this absurdly long house, he was intrigued by the shape of a mosquito coil, and decided on a spiral shape to make his idea work. After this realization, Ito would go on to study spirals in numerous ways, such as creating whirlpools in his bathtub, researching everything he could find about spirals, staring at spirals, eating spiral-shaped foods, and even raising pet snails, further inspired by how spirals in Japanese media usually represented warmth and comfort, such as with spirals on a character's cheek, thinking he could show the opposite of that warmth by displaying the true horror of spirals, resulting in what many consider to be Ito's magnum opus of cosmic terror, Gyo. Gyo follows Tadashi and Kaori as they suddenly encounter what can only be described as the stench of death, followed by the source of that stench, a fish with mechanical legs. In an attempt to escape these walking fish, they travel back to Tokyo to visit with Tadashi's scientist uncle. But soon after, Tokyo, all of Japan, and even the rest of the world is soon overrun with millions of these walking fish as they leave the sea and trample over the land, filling the air with that overpowering stench as they take over. Gyo was serialized in Big Comic Spirits from 2001 to 2002, being another one of Ito's most well-known stories. The inspiration for it came from the movie Jaws, as Ito felt that Spielberg captured the essence of fear that comes with a man-eating shark perfectly, and thought it would be even more horrifying to deliver that same fear in the form of a man-eating shark that can go on land as well. Frankenstein. Back in 1994, Asahi Shimbun commissioned a manga adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel from Ito, to coincide with the release of Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein film that was releasing that same year. This would be Ito's first time reading the original novel, and he was absolutely entranced by it, eager to adapt it as faithfully as possible while also putting his own spin on it. Ito's adaptation of Frankenstein would go on to be one of his most popular and critically acclaimed works, retelling the story of Victor Frankenstein's experiment on creating life that would become the very monster that would haunt his every waking moment. No Longer Human. A manga adaptation of the novel of the same name by Osamu Dazai, No Longer Human follows Oba Yozo and the tale of his melancholic life, as ever since he was a child, he's never understood other people, resulting in a seemingly normal life that's otherwise plagued with anxiety, misunderstanding, tragedy, and tender moments of connection. However, despite all of that, Yozo never truly understood what it meant to be human. Serialized in Big Comic Spirits from 2017 to 2018, Ito's adaptation of No Longer Human would go on to be critically acclaimed just like the original novel, becoming another one of Ito's most popular works. Long Dream. Tetsuro Mukoda checks himself into the hospital after having what he calls long dreams, as when he goes to sleep, he will dream for days, weeks, and even months at a time. The doctors are perplexed by his case, but as they observe him, they realize he is actually experiencing those incredible lengths of time whenever he goes to sleep. And what's worse, the dreams keep getting longer night after night, now experiencing years and even decades at a time, which are altering his appearance with each passing day that he awakes. Now, Tetsuro fears that if they can't find a cure soon, he will experience a dream that never ends. Long Dream has also become one of Ito's most popular and critically acclaimed works, and if you've never read an Ito story, this is a great place to start. Souichi Tsuji. Similar to Tomie, Souichi Tsuji is another one of Ito's reoccurring characters, having 14 chapters that feature Souichi at the time of making this video. First introduced in 1991 with the story A Happy Summer Vacation, Souichi is the youngest child of the Tsuji family, and definitely the black sheep too, as his oddball behavior includes chewing on nails, cooking up numerous bizarre schemes, and also dabbling in the art of curses and black magic, as he's able to create living dolls, bring bad fortune onto others, cause pain with the use of voodoo dolls, and was even able to prevent his grandfather from dying. While not one of Ito's most popular works, his Souichi stories have quite the following among his dedicated fanbase. Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yon Mu, an autobiographical tale about Ito's home life with his fiancée Eiko and 2 cats, Yon and Mu, along with the shenanigans they get up to being cat owners. It was serialized in monthly magazine Z from 2007 to 2008, consisting of 10 chapters. Following its release, Ito and his wife would include a letter and a bonus story about Yon and Mu in the book Teach Me, Michael, a textbook in support of feline disaster victims, a book which was intended to raise support for cat shelters after the Great Tohoku earthquake, which featured the story Yon Went to Heaven, along with a letter from Ito's wife chronicling the death of Yon from heart failure, and their grieving as a result. While definitely very different from Ito's other works, Yon and Mu's Cat Diary would go on to be one of his most popular. Junji Ito's Dog Diary, Boss Nan Nan. Similar to the Cat Diary, but also predating it, this is an autobiographical tale about Ito's mother's dog, Nan Nan, featured in Nemuki Special Animal Life in 1998. The Dog Diary consisted of 2 chapters back when Ito was drawing manga at his parents' house, featuring his interactions with Nan Nan, also illustrating how she's aged, and her eventual unfortunate passing. Junji Ito's Bath Diary, another autobiographical tale from Ito, detailing his experience giving his child a bath with the help of his wife, which also includes other stories about caring for his baby. This is also one of the few Ito stories that has never been translated into English officially or unofficially. Junji Ito's Slice of Life Diary, a diary of embellished patches. 3 autobiographical chapters about situations in Ito's everyday life. The first about drawing Rasputin the Patriot, and being plagued by mosquitoes from a nearby pond while he worked. The second about meeting the author for Rasputin the Patriot, Masaru Sato, and the awkward moment where Sato asked him about how he was planning to adapt his story when Ito had yet to read the book. And finally, a look into Ito's home life as a husband and father, assembling various pieces of furniture. Dissolving Classroom. Serialized in Comic Moto from 2013 to 2014, Dissolving Classroom follows Yuma Azawa, a teenager obsessed with worshipping the devil through apologies, and his demented younger sister, Chizumi, who was born as the devil's child. The two of them wreak havoc everywhere they go by melting people's brains, faces, and bodies into grease. Notably a step away from Ito's usual MO, Dissolving Classroom started as a way for Ito to make a commentary on public apologies in Japanese culture, and has since become one of his most divisive works for fans and critics alike. Rasputin the Patriot. A manga adaptation of Masaru Sato's autobiography, Trap State, Rasputin the Patriot tells the story of Japanese diplomat Mamoru Yuki, who is nicknamed the Rasputin of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yuki is arrested under suspicions of breach of trust, and is forced to try and prove his innocence against a legal system that is notoriously unforgiving. With his colleagues and country turning their backs on him, Yuki is on his own against the nation he so faithfully served. Rasputin the Patriot is one of the only manga Ito has worked on that he himself didn't write, as the writing was done by both Masaru Sato, the writer of the autobiography the manga is based on, and Takashi Nagasaki, who has co-written many manga with Naoki Urasawa, like Pluto, Master Keaton, and Billy Bat, while Ito was only in charge of the art for this project. With that in mind, this would technically make Rasputin the Patriot Ito's longest-running manga, as it ran for 53 chapters, serialized in Big Comic from 2010 to 2012. This is also easily Junji Ito's most out-of-place project, as Rasputin the Patriot is an actual complex political drama, rather than having anything to do with horror. Censor. A normal journalist named Wataru Tsuchiyado is doing his best to uncover the mystery behind Kyoko Byakuya, the lone survivor of a sudden volcanic eruption who emerged from a protective shell with long shining golden hair, who mysteriously disappeared shortly after the event. Censor is quite difficult to summarize coherently, because it's a plot with a lot of twists, turns, and unexplainable cosmic terror, but it was serialized in Nemuki Plus from 2018 to 2019. Unlike Ito's other works, he went into Censor wanting to write a much more character-driven narrative, since it's something he hadn't really attempted before, resulting in a story that's ending was decided by the path of the characters rather than by Ito himself. Fashion model. Another reoccurring character of Ito's would be the fashion model, Miss Fuchi, who has appeared in 4 stories up to this point, starting with the Souichi story, Rumors. Miss Fuchi is a model whose appearance isn't easy on the eyes, as she's not only freakishly tall, but she seems to be almost completely inhuman, as her facial features alone would be enough to scare anyone. But with the addition of her shark-like teeth, the rumors that she's also a cannibal might have more truth to it than you'd expect. Lovesickness. Ryusuke returns to his hometown after 10 years to find that some things haven't changed at all, as the popular activity of intersection fortune-telling is still going strong, which is where you ask a question to the first person you see on the street, and their answer will allegedly help you with your issue in one way or another. When Ryusuke was a child, a pregnant woman came to him with this very activity in search of hope, but as just a snot-nosed little kid, he blew her off. That night, the woman ended her life. Now with his return, and rumors of some tall, handsome young man dressed in black, driving young girls to end their lives after having their fortunes told, Ryusuke has no choice but to seek them out. Serialized in Nemuki in 1996, Lovesickness would end with 4 chapters. However, an epilogue chapter would be published in 2001, bringing the series to its official conclusion. Hellstar Remina. Serialized in Big Comic Spirit's Zokan Casual from 2004 to 2005, Hellstar Remina is about the discovery of a rogue planet traveling throughout the universe, the scientist who discovered it deciding to name it after his daughter, Remina. This discovery soon turns to pure terror, as this rogue planet suddenly starts heading directly towards Earth, destroying everything in its path. Upon its arrival, it turns out that rogue planet was actually a planet-sized organism, hell-bent on torturing humanity before it consumes them all. Oshikiri. Toru Oshikiri is the protagonist of Ito's Hallucination series, which consists of 6 chapters, first introduced with Hallucinations in 1989, and the final chapter releasing in 1993. While the first few stories don't have a consistent narrative, outside of focusing on Oshikiri's various potential hallucinations, the latter half of the chapters focus on Oshikiri's mansion, where he lives alone while his parents are abroad. This mansion appears somewhat like a castle, and as Oshikiri would soon discover, the mansion also acts as a gateway between different dimensions. Kai Sasu, the Summertime Graduation Trip. Featured as part of the light novel Kai Sasu by Hirokatsu Kihara, the final chapter was drawn by Ito in manga format, while still written by Kihara, with various other art pieces by Ito featured throughout the light novel's chapters. The light novel itself features multiple true stories of unsolved mysteries, with the final chapter, The Summertime Graduation Trip, featuring a story about 2 friends who visit an inn with a bathhouse. As they go down a set of stairs to the bathhouse, the stairs suddenly seem as if they're going on forever, before they encounter a ghostly woman with a lantern coming up the stairs. Deciding to continue down, they eventually reach the bathhouse, which is full of people, but something isn't quite right. Black Paradox. A group of 4 individuals meet up in person with plans to end their lives together after talking on the website Black Paradox. However, in their quest to end it all, they accidentally stumble upon a strange new world that brings with it a new mineral that will change history itself. The Strange Hikizuri Siblings. More of Ito's reoccurring characters, the 6 Hikizuri siblings first debuted in 1995, only having 2 chapters at the time with Narumi's boyfriend and The Seance, which follows the titular family as we get to know each of them and their individual quirks, as they try to track down their sister Narumi once she runs away, and also perform seances to speak to their deceased parents. The siblings have also recently made a return in 2022, with a new chapter featuring their long-lost uncle. Mimi's Tales of Terror. An adaptation of stories from Hirokatsu Kihara and Ichiro Nakayama's book, Shin Mimi Bakudo, which allegedly details various urban legends and scary stories that actually happened. Serialized in Comic Flapper Monthly from 2002 to 2003, Ito added a protagonist to these stories named Mimi to experience all of these supernatural occurrences, rather than have all of them be purely episodic like the original stories. One additional tale of terror was released in 2007 called Monster Prop, being the only Ito adaptation from Shin Mimi Bakudo that doesn't feature Mimi. The Hanging Balloons. Kazuko's best friend, Terumi Fujino, suddenly ended her own life by hanging herself from a telephone wire with a noose. Being a popular celebrity, her death inspired many copycats and overall took the media by storm. Not long after, rumors of her disembodied head floating throughout the night sky started popping up, with photo evidence included. Kazuko didn't believe the rumors, but her fellow classmate Shiro Ishii claims to have seen the head himself, calling Kazuko late at night to come see it. As she arrives, Kazuko not only witnesses Terumi's giant floating head, but she also witnesses another giant floating head that looks just like Shiro Ishii appear out of the night sky and hang him with a noose that's tied around its neck. While the police and none of her friends believe what she witnessed, they would soon change their tune, as these giant floating heads started appearing all across Japan and filled the skies, seeking out the individual it resembles in attempts to hang them as well. Other than staying indoors, nothing can be done to stop them, as even if you were to shoot them down, it would also kill the person it resembles. Now Kazuko lies in wait, as her hanging balloon tries to get her outside while she slowly starves. With a short follow-up story called The Return of the Hanging Balloons, we also learn that these balloons would suddenly disappear after 3 weeks' time, with the only survivors being the lucky few that were able to stay inside. Upon investigation, the balloons themselves appear to be made of nylon, with the individuals who were hung by them having their tissue turned into nylon as well. But before they can question the connection, the hanging balloons have made their return. The Hanging Balloons is my personal favorite Ito work, so I highly recommend it. My dear ancestors. Risa suddenly suffered from amnesia, and with no abnormalities to her health, it seems as if it's a completely mental phenomenon from something she experienced. While she can't quite put her finger on what it could be, she is stuck with a lingering sensation of immense dread, and soon suffers hallucinations of a giant caterpillar. Her classmate Souichi insists that the two of them were in love, even if she can't remember, later inviting her to his home, where his sickly father also insists that Risa even agreed to marry his son in the past. After returning home with more dread than before, Souichi returns in the middle of the night, claiming his father is about to die, and he asked to see her. Risa reluctantly goes back to Shuichi's home, only to be met with the very thing that caused her amnesia. The true appearance of Shuichi's father, as on top of his head are the scalps and brains of every single descendant of Shuichi's family up to that point, all alive and connected. Although, with Shuichi's father passing on, he needs to take up the mantle. And unfortunately for Risa, Shuichi also needs an heir to continue his family's legacy. Scarecrows. By a stroke of coincidence, residents of a small village discover that whenever they place a normal scarecrow on top of someone's grave, it will take on the appearance of the deceased. But on top of their appearances, perhaps something more sinister is also afoot. The Human Chair. Both an adaptation and continuation of Edogawa Ranpo's short story of the same name from 1925, where a chairmaker creates a sofa that he himself is able to enter and sit in, using it to commit crimes at a local hotel before being auctioned off to a political official, where he falls in love with their wife as she sits in the chair. An Unearthly Love. Another adaptation of Edogawa Ranpo's work, An Unearthly Love adapts the story A Brute's Love, where Kyoko takes part in an arranged marriage with Kadono from a renowned family, who is not only extremely handsome, but also rumored to be extremely misogynistic. But nothing could be further from the truth, as he ended up being incredibly kind. However, something began to feel a bit off. As Kyoko started to notice, he kept sneaking off to the storehouse most nights. Eventually deciding to follow him, she hears the whispers of Kadono with a secret lover. Except when she later tries to confront the woman, she can never find her, eventually discovering it's no woman at all. Instead, it's nothing more than a lifeless doll kept in a chest. Tomio, Red Turtleneck. The serial cheater Tomio falls in love with a fortune teller who is only after his head. And not the head you're thinking. After severing his head with her hair, Tomio walks around in a blood-soaked turtleneck, desperately holding his head in place as to not fully sever his nerves. With nowhere else to turn, he visits his ex-girlfriend Madoka for help, but unbeknownst to them, help isn't coming. Demon's Voice. Featured as a bonus short story in the Siren Maniac's guidebook for the Siren video game series, Demon's Voice follows a group of fishermen on a stroke of bad luck, when one night out of the blue, they hear a loud siren that appears to be coming from the open water. Next thing they know, their luck has turned around, and the men are pulling in a massive haul of fresh fish. Except, they aren't fish at all. They're corpses. Flesh-colored horror. Momoko Takikawa is a kindergarten teacher who has to deal with the problem child in her class, Chikara Kawabe, who has a tendency to scare the other kids with his odd appearance and even tends to get violent, attempting to scratch their faces. This bad behavior continues until he ends up getting expelled, but even so, he refuses to go home, indicating that his bad behavior might have something to do with how his mother treats him. As within Chikara's home life, his mother continuously attempts to remove his skin with the help of her sister, as Chikara's mother believes that true beauty is the appearance of muscles beneath the skin. Shiver. Plagued with memories of the sight of his dying grandfather filled with holes, Yuji notices the girl next door, Rina, has a similar disease, visited regularly by a strange doctor that leaves Rina screaming about bugs all night long. However, whenever Yuji notices Rina from his window, she smiles and points towards something in their overgrown garden. After discussing this disease with his friend Hideo, they come across Yuji's grandfather's diary, which tells the tale of a jade statue that caused him to start developing holes all over his body, which caused him to be immensely cold from the wind passing through them. And after being visited by this strange doctor, he began to see insects burrowing in the holes. He attempted to get rid of the jade statue by throwing it out the window, but it landed in their neighbor's garden, and soon after, he would pass away. Next time Yuji sees Rina, all of the holes have disappeared. But whatever became of that jade statue? The Window Next Door. Hiroshi Sakaguchi and his family move into a new house, and once they go door to door to greet the neighbors, the house next door doesn't answer. And according to the other neighbors, they haven't seen who lives there once in 10 years. What's even more peculiar is that the only window on their house faces the window at Hiroshi's room. Late at night, while trying to sleep, Hiroshi hears a horrifying voice calling out to him, and when he looks out the window to see who it is, he finds himself face to face with the thing next door. Snow White. Ito's take on the classic fairy tale, the Queen of the Kingdom is sung praises of her beauty from the magic mirror, claiming she is the most beautiful in all the land. That is, until Snow White becomes her foster daughter, and the mirror now claims that she is the most beautiful in all the land. Out of jealousy, the queen has Snow White murdered so she can retake her place as number 1. However, Snow White is mysteriously brought back to life. Manchurian Clutch. This one is actually a non-existent manga that was drawn by Ito for the detective TV show Partner in Darkness. Featured within the first season of the show, the fake manga was called Manchurian Clutch. Since it's not real, you can't exactly read it, which means I can't exactly explain its plot, but a few screenshots of the work exist online if you want to check it out anyway. Mr. Inagawa's Ghost Story Treasure Box. A semi-autobiographical story written by Junji Inagawa, a well-known horror talk show personality, and illustrated by Ito as a collaboration between the two, that released in the Real Horror Stories magazine in 2008. It tells the story of Inagawa going out to film deep in the woods at night in the middle of the winter with his film crew, when he and multiple other crew members encounter a woman wearing a summer dress and black heels. But every time they try to get a good look at her, she disappears. The Back Alley. Ishida rents a room in the house of Mrs. Uchiyama and her daughter Shinobu. During the first night of his stay, he begins hearing the loud racket of children in the back alley. Except, that alley is completely fenced off. Upon going out the window to tell the kids to keep it down, he is surprised to find nothing. Later on, Ishida comes across a man outside the house, who tells him that there are 3 child-sized stains in that back alley that come alive at night. Although Ishida doesn't believe him, he has to find out for himself. Earthbound. Out of nowhere, people posing in a singular spot started sprouting up all across Japan, and although they are still able to speak, none of them reveal why they've decided to bind themselves to the spot in which they stand, and if they are forcefully moved, they end up back in the same spot with the same pose they had before. Many thought it might be some sort of disease, but regardless of the cause, these individuals were soon dubbed the Earthbound. As it would later turn out, those who were Earthbound would eventually solidify in place like an actual statue, and after intensely interrogating multiple Earthbound individuals, the root cause of their fate would be discovered, as everyone who was Earthbound was stuck in the place where they committed some sort of horrific crime, and were now stuck there for all eternity with their guilt. Wooden Spirit. Megumi and her father own a truly outstanding house, one of such architectural achievement that it was even declared a national treasure. One day, an architecture student named Manami approaches them to see the house, claiming that she loves it, and eventually begs the father to let her stay there temporarily. But after pulling her weight of the chores and even marrying into the family, let's just say Manami loves the house a little too much, and what was once a home suddenly becomes a house of horrors. The circus comes to town. The Papyrus Circus is unlike any other, as the star of the circus will get to marry the beautiful tightrope walker, Lelia. But unbeknownst to everyone performing, their acts will end in death, because the ringmaster of the circus is actually a Shinigami. So after the audience watches each performer perish, one after another, the ringmaster needs volunteers from the crowd. I don't want to be a ghost. While driving alone on a mountain at night, Shigeru comes across a girl covered in blood on the side of the road. Fearing the worst, he rushes her to the hospital. Soon after, the girl, named Misaki, visits him at his home to express her thanks, where the two of them start a secret relationship without his pregnant wife's knowledge. According to Misaki, Shigeru is surrounded by ghosts, and she can't wait to have a taste of them. Falling. A girl named Erika attempts to hang herself, but is saved by her boyfriend. She left a note claiming that something horrible was going to happen in their town, and upon saving her, she says he should have just let her die. The following night, 200 residents of the town all walk off together and mysteriously disappear, Erika included. However, she is soon located by a search party stuck high up in a tree. In a quest for answers, some of the remaining residents try to interrogate her, but Erika's incoherent statement about how they should have let her die continues. That is, until she randomly wakes up and says, "They're falling down," as some of those missing individuals suddenly fall from the sky. Used record. A mysterious record with no name on the sleeve captures the heart of all those who hear it, driving them to do anything they possibly can to acquire the record for themselves. even going so far as to murder people for it. While not much is known about it, it's rumored to be one of the few copies of a song that was recorded after death. The Rib Woman. Yuki is so ashamed of her figure that she even refuses to go swimming, deciding she needs to have some of her ribs surgically removed to be happy with her appearance. However, before going through with it, she runs into her brother's girlfriend, Ruriko, who hears a haunting melody traveling through the air. As they investigate it, they encounter a mysterious woman playing some sort of instrument. She disappears, leaving the instrument behind, where they discover it's made from a person's rib. Soon after, Ruriko ends up dead, with all of her ribs removed. But even after this tragedy, Yuki still chooses to go through with that surgery. Slumber. When Takuya wakes up every morning, his head is instantly filled with memories of killing people. The only thing is, he's just a normal student trying to be a lawyer, and he doesn't have a single murderous bone in his body. Yet, after he falls asleep, he must somehow be hitting the streets looking for would-be victims every night. Now that the police are onto him, it's a race against the clock before he gets caught. Children of the Earth. On a kindergarten field trip into the mountains, all of the children suddenly disappeared. Their parents then form a search party to look for them, only to find all of their children embedded in mud deep in the forest, lifeless and unresponsive. The parents attempt to pull their kids out of the mud, only for them to be continually stretched out of the hole, unable to be freed. All of the kids then sink into the earth, never to be seen again. The Will. Hiriko's sister Teiko ended her life via train the night before. When her body was discovered, she was clutching a piece of paper that stated, "I want to place a curse. I want to return as a ghost and haunt you." However, the name of the person she wanted to haunt was covered in blood and illegible. Soon after, Teiko's ghost starts appearing in her family's house, covered in blood and searching for something. But the thing is it really Teiko? Dying young. While the reason or cause is unknown, girls all across Ayako's school suddenly start becoming more and more beautiful. But at the same time, they start looking more and more sickly, which continues until these girls start dropping dead one after another for seemingly no reason. Out of fear for their lives, a rumor begins to spread that you need to kill another girl close to your age to prevent yourself from dying. So now, Ayako is forced to watch her former friends aim to become murderers. The sad tale of the principal post. Upon the completion of their new house, the family suddenly hears cries for help within the crawlspace, where they find their father trapped underneath the principal post of the house. It's unknown how he got there, but not wanting to risk toppling the house over by moving his body, he accepts his fate and dies supporting the home. Roar. Masaki and Mimura decide to take a little afternoon hike into the mountains, when they suddenly encounter a flash flood with an entire village worth of people being swept away in the current. Except, something about this flood isn't quite right. Just as fast as it came, it disappeared. And to make matters even more strange, there was no rain, and the ground underneath it was completely dry. Afterward, accepting the fact that the two of them were lost, they decide to stay the night in the woods. Then, upon trying to find their way out the next morning, they encounter a flash flood again, with the same exact people being swept away that they saw the first time. Slug Girl. Usually extremely talkative, Yuko suddenly becomes very quiet, and has difficulty speaking. When looked at by a doctor to see what's wrong, they couldn't find anything outside of a decline in her mental health. Her good friend Rie has never seen Yuko like this before, noting that she seems very afraid, much like the time she was scared with a slug as a child, the very thing Yuko hates the most. Through some twisted turn of fate, the next time Rie sees Yuko, her tongue has turned into a slug. The Gift Bearer. 15 years ago, an unnamed hypnotist was hired to hypnotize a corrupt businessman named So Okuda. Upon breaking into the man's house, he finds him sleeping, while his son remains tied up and beaten on the floor. He goes on to hypnotize Okuda, instructing him to give himself to society and make everyone happy. In the present day, The unnamed hypnotist returns to the same town to find that the man's son was also unintentionally hypnotized in the same way, and now gives out wooden carvings of his father to everyone in town in an attempt to make them happy. Mountain of the Gods. 3 hikers sit in a lodge on Mount H, exchanging pleasantries, when they start discussing the supernatural occurrences that happen on the trail there, such as the recent mysterious death of a female hiker, along with their own encounters with ghostly hikers in the past. She is a slow walker. Featured as part of the I Am a Hero Koshiki comic anthology, 8 Tales of the ZQN, She is a Slow Walker tells the story of a couple arguing about which is scarier, slow zombies or fast zombies. Soon after, the woman is bit by a zombie and promptly infected, turning into a zombie that moves so incredibly slow that you could hardly notice. Shell of Manjunuma. Deep in the mountains there exists a swamp called Manjunuma, which is filled with turtles that the locals despise. The reason being that a massive flood killed many of the nearby villagers, and it's now believed that the turtles possess their spirits after consuming their corpses, as on the belly of the turtle shell you can see a faint human face, while the crows that also live there are said to be cursed by demons who hunt the souls of the turtles. And to the terror of the local residents, whenever the crows hunt the turtles, they drop their human-faced underbellies in front of someone's house, which marks the misfortune that will fall upon that family shortly after, almost as if the crows are showing you your dying face. Library vision. Koko's husband Goro was handed down a personal library of over 150,000 books from his father, all of which he'd read 3 times before. Everything was going great until one day Goro started obsessing over the books, going so far as to scour the shelves looking for anything out of place day in and day out, recording everything in a personal diary as he does. This obsession would drive Goro mad, to the point where he would start attempting to memorize every single word of every single book, just in case something happened to them. Red String. Tomo is suddenly dumped by his girlfriend Momoko, and in his heartbreak, stays home from school for 3 days to get over it. Upon his return to school, his friends notice he has a red string sewn into his wrist. Upon seeing the doctor, it turns out this red string was woven throughout his chest as well. Tomo always used to say that he and Momoko were connected by the red string of fate, and by severing that connection, maybe this red string was trying to find its way back to her. Blackbird. On a hike in the woods, Kume comes across a crippled man named Shiro, who after being rescued, reveals that he had been stuck in the woods for a full month, somehow managing to survive off of provisions in his backpack. Truly a miracle that he managed to survive that long. However, upon his recovery in the hospital, he asks his savior Kume to stay the night, to which Kume witnesses a tall woman on top of Shiro's chest, force-feeding him an unknown meat substance in the middle of the night. She smiles hauntingly at Kume and promptly leaves the room, to which Shiro reveals that he actually managed to survive that full month, because this strange woman kept force-feeding him strange meat and liquids to sustain him. And even after being rescued, she still comes to feed him every night. The Enigma of Amigara Fault. This one can basically be summed up with only one word: overrated. But jokes aside, following an earthquake in Japan, a giant fault line was formed in Amigara Mountain, revealing thousands of mysterious people-shaped holes in the fault that seemed to endlessly stretch into the earth. With no discernible explanation for these holes, it became a global phenomenon that attracted hundreds of individuals to the site. For many, it was just to gaze upon the unexplainable formations, but for others, they are searching for the hole that they say was made for them. While this story was only included as a bonus one-shot in the publication of Gyo, it would go on to become one of Ito's most famous and critically acclaimed works. Army of One. This one can basically be summed up with only one word as well: underrated. Army of One tells the story of a social recluse named Michio, who has spent the last 7 years holed up in his room. Meanwhile, outside in the real world, things are getting strange, as groups of people are going missing and later being discovered sewn together with no signs of a struggle, which the internet dubs the Stitch Murders. At the same time, radio stations are being hijacked and playing an eerie song called Army of One, while planes fly overhead and drop flyers for this army of one as well. Michio's former classmate Natsuko is working to put together their class's reunion, but even though Michio has a crush on her, he hesitates to participate, because with each passing day, hanging out in groups gets progressively more dangerous, as the Stitch murders keep getting worse. Army of One was included as a bonus one-shot in the publication of Hellstar Remina, and while not quite as popular as many of Ito's other works, hardcore fans consider this to be Ito's true magnum opus. Deserter. Saburo Furukawa deserted the Japanese military back in 1944, being sheltered by his friend Adara and the rest of the Kikyuo family in their storage shed. While being sheltered there, Saburo would start a relationship with Adara's sister, Kimie. After being caught by Adara, Kimie would run out into the fields and be shot down by an American fighter plane. Because Adara blames Saburo for his sister's death, he's prepared an elaborate ruse to get revenge, being that the war was still ongoing 8 years later, forcing Saburo to stay secluded in hiding. Smashed. Upon getting lost in South America, Ogi is saved by a local tribe that gives him a special honey from a native plant as a souvenir. Ogi shares this honey with his friends back in Japan, and this honey is so tasty that all other foods pale in comparison. However, the local tribe warned Ogi to make sure he isn't caught while eating it. One of Ogi's friends decide they can't live without the honey, and decide to break into his place to steal it, only to find that he is now nothing but a giant splatter against the wall. But, sucks to be him. At least now they can take the honey. Although, upon splitting up the honey among his friends, one of them suddenly gets smashed while tasting it. Approval. Kyosuke and Misuzu want nothing more than to get married. However, Misuzu's father refuses to give his approval. Sick and fed up with her family's treatment, Kyosuke breaks up with Misuzu, as she refuses to elope without her father's permission. Upon breaking up, Kyosuke falls in love with someone new, but out of the blue, Misuzu's brother Setsuo meets with him, explaining that Misuzu confessed how deep her love really was. So now, Setsuo wants Kyosuke to try getting their father's permission once again. Unbeknownst to him, this plot for marriage had a more tragic outcome than he would realize for many years to come. Whispering Woman. A young girl named Mayumi is plagued with a strange mental illness, where she has trouble deciding what she needs to do at every given moment, requiring a caretaker to help her manage the obstacles of everyday life. However, these caretakers usually don't last long, as caring for Mayumi is a taxing endeavor to say the least. Because of that, her father soon hires a woman named Mitsu, who enthusiastically takes the job, immediately becoming Mayumi's guardian angel, whispering over her shoulder constantly to help Mayumi make it through each day. Although, it's evident that as time passes, Mitsu is physically deteriorating, to the point where she eventually passes away. Even so, Mayumi is now able to live a normal life, as the whispering still continues. Kao Kao-sama and I. Featured as part of the Daijiro Morohoshi 50th anniversary project, celebrating the influential horror mangaka's 50-year debut anniversary. Ito was one of 18 artists to put his own spin on one of Daijiro's works. In the Soil. Teranishi and Eiji attend their 20-year high school reunion, where the entire class is unearthing a time capsule filled with letters they wrote 20 years ago. While digging it up, they reflect on the old days and how everyone got along so well. That is, aside from the oddball in their class, Kumi Shinoda, who wasn't present at the gathering. At least, that's what they thought, until they opened up the capsule. The Return. The story of a girl named Yuka, who suddenly passes away. However, before she departs, she promises her boyfriend Mitsuo that she'll return. Following her passing, Mitsuo could feel her presence at all times, but the position of said presence was always changing. That is, until the day she finally returned, within a meteor crashing to Earth. Death Row Doorbell. A family is brutally attacked by a biker gang while out on a trip, with the father and younger brother being mercilessly killed, the mother put into a coma, older brother ruthlessly beaten, and daughter scared half to death. The gang would eventually be caught and put on trial, with the gang leader being put on death row pending execution. After some time passed, the gang leader would show up to the remaining family's door night after night, begging for forgiveness, before turning into some sort of phantom and disappearing. Unendurable Labyrinth. Noriko and Sayoko go hiking deep into the mountains and end up getting lost, eventually stumbling onto an ancient Buddhist order who dabble in esoteric practices like living mummification. The two of them decide to stay for a few days to take part in their meditation practices, as Sayoko was having some internal issues, also meeting a girl named Kuramoto during their stay, who was searching for her missing brother who seemingly joined the order. After overhearing that 100 monks were going into the woods to begin their eternal meditation, the three of them follow, thinking that Kuramoto's brother might be among them, eventually following them into a deep, winding labyrinth that contains hundreds, maybe even thousands of mummified corpses standing upright from wall to wall. Dissection-chan. Ruriko Tamiya has a fetish, or unhealthy obsession, with dissections. As a child, she grew up wanting to dissect small animals, but now as an adult, she wishes to be dissected herself, going so far as to beg people on the street to cut her up, and even pretending to be dead so she can be dissected by unsuspecting medical students. Strange Pavilion. In the year 2105, people are in line to see a genetic recreation of a cormorant, a bird once used to catch fish. However, what appears before them can only be described as a mutated abomination that swallows two of the spectators before it, as if they were the fish it once hunted. The Lighthouse. Created for Japanese theater screenings of the film The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and directed by Robert Eggers. Theatergoers were given a pamphlet for the film that contained a 6-page manga adaptation of the film by Ito himself. With only 6 pages present, it briefly illustrated some of the early scenes in the movie, ending by saying that the rest of the manga is continued within the film itself. Heart of a Father. Todo is a rich businessman who is very hard on his 3 children. Unfortunately for them, they all suffer from intense migraines that occur for 1 minute at a time, before they miraculously recover like nothing happened. To make matters more strange, they never suffer headaches at the same time. The reason behind this is revealed to be the father taking over their bodies with his mind, so that he can experience the childhood he never received. But the consequences of his actions weigh heavily on all of them. Ghosts of Prime Time. A comedian randomly dies with a sinister smile upon his face. Upon hearing the news of this, Suguo decides he needs to take his friend Kiesuke to a comedy club, as Kiesuke never laughs. After watching a few acts, a comedy duo called Twilight Pacific Peace comes onto the stage, whose act absolutely blows. However, after a while, people in the audience start bursting out with uncontrollable laughter, until the whole place is erupting. Outside of Kiesuke, because he can see that there's something supernatural going on with this comedy act, dragging his friend out before things get sinister. That said, the comedy duo notice that Kiesuke wasn't laughing, and decide they need to track him down to find out why. Master Umezu and Me. An autobiographical tale of Ito's childhood, namely how he became completely obsessed with Kazuo Umezu's works, and how influential they were to him growing up. A shit to remember. An autobiographical tale of a young Ito wanting to buy a fake pile of shit at a festival. A social study challenge for Junji Ito. A set of 3 autobiographical chapters of Ito's experiences, specifically his quest to better understand life, and the social constructs surrounding it, involving going to a waterfall to become one with nature, women who like to hunt for marriage, and also the art of katsu training. This is another example of Ito's untranslated works. Angoulême International Manga Festival Report. An autobiographical tale of Ito's experience at the Angoulême International Manga Festival that he attended, which is yet another of Ito's untranslated works. Routine Work Horror. An autobiographical tale of Ito's manga writing routine, and the horrors that surround it, which is yet another of Ito's untranslated works. The Mansion of Phantom Pain. A man in desperate need of employment gets a new live-in job at a mansion. The job in question involves helping the owner's son manage their chronic pain. The only issue is that this chronic pain occurs outside of the boy's body, and happens randomly all throughout the mansion. Magami Nanakuse. Karoru Koketsu is a massive fan of the author Magami Nanakuse, who writes numerous books that feature characters with extreme personal quirks. Her books would inspire Koketsu to become an author herself, but no matter how hard she tries, she can't seem to write anything, deciding to send a letter to her inspiration for help. To her surprise, Magami actually wrote back and invited her to her place of work deep in the mountains. However, upon her arrival, Magami turns out to be a horrible person, who locks Koketsu in a dark dungeon with many other individuals, as being secluded in the pitch black will undoubtedly bring out Koketsu's personal quirk, which will be the inspiration for Magami's next novel. The Conversation Room. Having been in a car accident, Hashimoto and the driver of the other car, Sugie, are admitted into a shared hospital room with 4 other patients. Later that night, Hashimoto witnesses the other 4 patients begin speaking in their sleep, before the 4 of them all rise up out of their beds in sync and leave the room together. After switching rooms due to Sugie's nagging, the 4 of them attack Sugie in the middle of the night, where Hashimoto notices that the 4 of them are connected at the mouth by some sort of snake-like tentacles. In Mirror Valley, a group investigates 2 abandoned villages that were covered in broken mirrors that used to be pointed toward one another. In an attempt to find out what happened to the villagers, they come up with the idea to erect new mirrors toward each village once again, only to be shown the tragic past that befell those villagers within the mirror's reflection. Sword of the Reanimator. Keiji Soga goes out at night in an attempt to catch flying specters that fly across the night sky, following a horde of them to some sort of shrine, where they surround a strange man with a sword. Having witnessed him in the act of absorbing these specters, the man chases Keiji until he falls off a cliff. Having miraculously survived the fall, Keiji wakes up with his family the next day to find his grandfather has passed away. Being a well-respected politician, his party members make the decision to bring in a mysterious man who can allegedly bring the dead back to life. That man being none other than the strange man with a sword Keiji saw the previous night. Keepsake. After hearing the sounds of crying out in the graveyard, it's discovered that a baby was born from the corpse of Lady Suzu, who was the wife of Ishikawa Toyoji that died 9 months prior. Wanting to keep up appearances for his family, he agrees to raise the child with the help of his servant, Lady Tane. But this certainly complicates things, as with the passing of Lady Suzu, Ishikawa was instantly remarried to his mistress, Lady Mitsu, who also recently gave birth to his other child. And to make matters even worse, Lady Suzu was unable to conceive children, so how exactly was this child even born? The Groaning Drain. Reina is approached by a very smelly acquaintance named Kari, who wants nothing more than to be her boyfriend. Reina outright refuses because she can't stand the smell, and to make matters worse, Reina's mother is the textbook definition of a nagging clean freak. So once her sister Shinri catches wind of Kari's smelly existence, she comes up with an elaborate plan to get him invited over to their house so that their mother can embarrass him, which goes better than she ever could have planned. After this embarrassing experience, the drains in their house begin getting mysteriously clogged, with a moaning sound coming from them that refuses to stop. Is it possible that Kari found a way to enter their pipes? Ghost Heights Management Association. Shogo Yanagita is a horror mangaka who just moved into the Ghost Heights Saigo apartment block. Against his will, he's appointed as the president of general affairs for the entire apartment, where he's forced to help out all the other tenants while struggling against his own deadlines. The only thing is, all the other tenants happen to be monsters. Biohouse. Kubota joins her boss at his estate for dinner, except they're partaking in quite the peculiar palate, consisting of insects, lizards, and animal blood. Things take a turn for disaster after her boss tries to have her drink a glass of his own blood. Angered by her refusal, he stabs himself in the neck, gushing blood all over the place as he chases her throughout the house, trying to make her drink it. The Face Burglar. Kame isn't like other girls. In fact, she's not like other humans at all, because as soon as she gets close to someone, she's able to biologically change her appearance to resemble them one-to-one. Layers of Fear. After their father made a strange discovery during an archaeological dig involving a layered burial site, his family was subjected to a strange curse, where the youngest daughter, Reimi, has layers upon layers of her younger selves underneath her skin, and the eldest daughter, Narumi, has layers upon layers of teeth. Madonna. Mari Amano transfers to a strict Catholic all-girls boarding school, and is immediately met with conflict, as the headmaster, Yukido, is a serial cheater who has his eyes on her beauty, while the vice principal, Misuzu, who is also his wife, is fully aware of his transgressions and lashes out in anger against the other students as a result. Things start getting even more crazy when it's revealed that Misuzu truly believes she's the reincarnation of the Virgin Mary, and has the unholy power of turning people into pillars of salt. Greased. Yui lives with her brother and father above their father's barbecue shop. Because of the poor ventilation, their entire home is covered in grease, causing Yui to become sensitive to it. Her older brother Goro drinks grease right out of the bottle for pleasure, and as he hits puberty, he ends up getting covered in acne, which results in him being ruthlessly bullied at school. One day, Goro accidentally pops a bunch of his zits in frustration, causing Yui to scream out in disgust on instinct, to which Goro proceeds to start popping his zits all over her face and strangling her, saying he's going to start killing everyone. Their father then interferes and kills Goro with a frying pan, before secretly selling his flesh to customers in the barbecue joint. It's a real hit with the customers. Ether Village. Yuta and his friends go to visit his hometown, but have to stop in a village called Tawano Muda on the way. As physics students, they are surprised to find that the village contains these giant pyramids, and is run by some sort of perpetual motion machines. They meet up with Yuta's childhood friend, Haruto, who was studying the theory of perpetual motion with his now deceased father, and has continued his father's work by redesigning the entire village with these perpetual motion machines. Things take a turn for the sinister, as Haruto is surrounded by silent servants, who later turns out to be reanimated corpses that run on a mysterious energy in the village that Haruto calls ether. Scripted love. Although Kaori was warned about his playboy behavior, Takahashi is breaking up with her anyway, as he believes he needs to see other women for his writing. But just in case she ever misses him, he gives her a videotape containing 6 hours of a scripted conversation between the two of them. But rather than let him go, Kaori murders him on the spot. After later watching the videotape and realizing that this is the man she's loved all along, rather than the sorry excuse for a man bleeding out in the next room, Kaori realizes that this is all she ever needed. The bully. Kyodiko tells the tale of her past to her boyfriend Yutaro, where she used to be a massive bully to a young boy named Nao, who wanted nothing more than to just play with her. As time went on, the bullying got so bad that Nao eventually moved away. Now in the present, the two of them have spontaneously met again as adults, and with Nao's new charm, the two of them fall in love. And after having their child, Hiroshi, Nao suddenly disappears. As fate would have it, Hiroshi is the spitting image of Nao, and the bully inside Kyodiko never really left. Beehive. Takano has an obsession with bees, wasps, and the like. But one day while attempting to take a wasp's nest, a young boy beats him to it, and is surprisingly able to do it without any gear, or getting stung even once. On another occasion, Takano is showing his new girlfriend Yoriko how he tracks bees to their nests, and upon following one, he finds a cave, where the young boy from before has an entire collection of numerous types of bees, all living together in harmony, when it's entirely against their nature to do so. Out of pure jealousy, he returns to the cave to steal the entire collection, killing the boy in the process. But with whispers of the boy's disappearance, it seems the bees are still gravitating to him even after death. Clubhouse. Yukari's best friends, Chikako and Manai, decide to investigate an abandoned house that's supposedly haunted. Yukari stays behind, but after the two of them come out, they stop associating with each other altogether. Yukari just wants them to make up already, but they refuse. Instead, Chikako claims she has an entirely new group of friends that she wants Yukari to meet, taking her back to that same haunted house from before. The thing that drifted ashore. A gigantic unknown sea creature washes up dead on the shore off the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Scientists believe it must be a prehistoric creature and want to preserve it, while numerous others visit the corpse out of pure curiosity. As the creature begins to rot, those present begin to notice something moving inside the creature's translucent skin, soon realizing that what's inside the creature are tons of people. After cutting them out, the people who were trapped inside are found to be still alive, but mentally insane. One of the identified victims even disappeared at sea over 7 years ago. So who knows how long those other individuals had been trapped inside this creature, or what horrors they've witnessed deep at the bottom of the sea. Futon. After getting married, Madoka's husband Tomio suddenly wouldn't leave his futon, claiming that there were demons at the window, and insisted he needs to hide under the blanket. Madoka didn't believe it and was forced to work overtime to care for him, until one night, she saw the demons too. Splendid Shadow Song. One day while passing by a musician on the street, Tomio starts hearing the same song over and over in her head as if she can't get it out. Next thing you know, that same song is a radio hit, getting stuck in the heads of millions. And no matter what any of them do, even blasting other songs straight into their eardrums isn't enough to escape that haunting melody. The Town Without Streets. After dealing with extreme lack of privacy from her immediate family, Saiko decides to go live with her aunt that she hasn't seen in ages. Traveling to the town her aunt lives in, Saiko is confronted with numerous people in masks, entering people's houses that block the middle of the road. Upon talking to one of the masked subjects about how to get around, they explain that one day these buildings just started appearing over the course of a month. With no witnesses on who was building them, there would be new ones every morning. People attempted to knock them down, but it ended up being a fruitless effort. So people adapted, and now they just walk through each other's house to get where they need to be. Eventually finding her aunt's home in the heart of the disaster, Saiko's lack of privacy at home was nothing compared to this. Drifting spores. Masao's throat started feeling uncomfortable out of the blue, and next thing he knew, he was producing these black floating hairballs that spoke his true thoughts, driving him to end his own life after ridicule from his true thoughts floating around the town. Next thing anybody knew, they were also producing these strange hairballs that aired their true feelings, resulting in fights, divorces, and even murder. Bloodsucking Darkness. After her boyfriend broke up with her, Nami decided she needed to lose some weight, becoming bulimic and anorexic as a result. She would then start having strange reoccurring dreams where she's stuck running through raining blood. Upon calling out for help, a strange hand reaches toward her before she awakes. Soon after, she runs into fellow classmate Kazuya, and after the two of them begin hanging out, he reveals to her that he's come across a ton of vampire bats who suck his blood and then sneak into her room at night to vomit his blood into her mouth in an attempt to keep her well nourished, since she isn't eating. The spirit flow of Aokigahara. Norio and his girlfriend Mika have agreed to go into Aokigahara Forest to find a good place to die together, as Norio has found out he's terminally ill, and Mika doesn't want to go on without him. While trying to find the perfect spot to die, they come across something glowing in the woods. Upon inspecting it the next day, they find a strange cave, where all the trees in front of it are completely smooth. Since they're going to die anyway, they decide to wait and see if the cave will glow again that night. But what they discover is out of this world, as an entire wave of spirits flow down the cave's path through the forest. Norio decides jumping into the flowing souls would be the perfect way to go, but after the souls stop flowing, Norio is found by Mika clinging to a tree, where he feels almost newly reinvigorated, and decides he needs to stay in the flow of souls, no longer wishing to die. The Inn. As a child, Mitsuyo's father suddenly became obsessed with turning their home into an inn, as he had a dream where his ancestors told him that if he dug beneath the house, he would find hot springs. Through his obsessive behavior, he would actually dig deep enough to discover a hot spring beneath the house, about 20 meters down. Even with such a legendary discovery, his wife was fed up with his obsession, taking Mitsuyo and leaving her father. After 10 years, Mitsuyo tells this tale to one of her friends, who insists on going to see if the inn is still operating. although Mitsuyo wants nothing to do with it. Upon finding the place, he finds that the hot spring is blood red, with strange people emerging from underneath the water one after another. What Mitsuyo's father found wasn't a hot spring, but instead, a portal to hell. Face firmly in place. On a seemingly normal trip to the dentist, Dr. Otake requests that Yagawa sit in his new device to get an accurate picture of her lower jaw. The only problem is that this contraption looks like a medieval torture device that locks her head in place with 2 metal clamps that enter each ear. Dr. Otake leaves the room momentarily, but falls down some stairs and gets knocked out on his way out. Yagawa is then stuck in this horrendous mechanism until help arrives, but it seems like help isn't coming. The World of Nami Himuro, a tribute made by Ito for the mangaka Nami Himuro, which was featured in a special edition of Monthly Halloween back in 1990, marking this as yet another untranslated Ito work. Memory. Rie has no memory from the ages of 7 to 14, aside from one, where she's staring at her face in the mirror. Except, it isn't the face she knows. Instead, it's a hideously ugly one. Her family denies that she was ever ugly, but Rie gets the feeling they're hiding the truth from her, knowing in her heart that somehow, that face is hers. A doll's hellish burial. Over 30% of the children in the world's population have early onset doll's disease, where they slowly turn into wooden dolls. Maria has suffered the same fate, but her parents agree that she'll always be kept by their side, as they've heard stories of parents throwing out their children after they turn into dolls, and they kept that mindset until her body kept changing. The Bridge. Kanako's grandmother, Osude, lives alone in the middle of nowhere, and sent an urgent message for her to come visit. Upon reaching the bridge that leads to her house, Kanako runs into a grotesque, ghostly man, immediately running away to her grandmother's house to escape it. After making it inside, Osude tells Kanako about how the ghost is actually her deceased uncle, and every night he appears with every other deceased member of her village as they call her name, knowing that they want to drag her under the bridge on the river, like all of them had been laid to rest before. Ice Cream Bus. Sonohara recently moved to a new town with his son Tomoki. In their neighborhood, an ice cream bus frequently comes around that not only offers the local kids tasty treats, but also takes them on a ride around the block while they eat. After some convincing, Sonohara allows Tomoki to get some ice cream and ride around on the bus, but something about it is a little off, as apparently the driver gives all the kids riding a ton of strawberry ice cream for free. As the weather warms up, the consequences of that choice melts away. Bloodsickness of the White Sands Village. Dr. Furuhara moves to the remote White Sands Village to be their local doctor, as the town has been without one for 10 whole years. Upon his arrival, he quickly notices that all of the villagers have a very pale, anemic complexion. And to make matters stranger, each of them have a strange condition where they suddenly bleed profusely all over their bodies, only to suddenly stop bleeding and carry on like normal. Dr. Furuhata aims to get to the bottom of this strange illness, and also to be the best doctor to the villagers that he can possibly be. Gentle Goodbye. Makoto Tokura marries Riko against his family's wishes, and soon after she learns about their family's mysterious ritual of conjuring what they dub after images of their deceased family members, which are basically something like spirits that live and operate in the real world, but will fade away completely over the course of 20 years, allowing the Tokura family to cope with their family member's death, and comfortably say goodbye to their loved ones over the course of the next few decades. Riko has a constant fear of losing her father, and with the new knowledge of this ritual, begs the Tokura family to make an afterimage of her father once he dies. However, they refuse. This refusal is what opens up Riko's eyes to the Tokura family's hidden secrets. Bronze Statue. Mr. Sonobe built a local park and placed a bronze statue of himself and his wife there to commemorate it. Not long after, Mrs. Sonobe murdered him. The odd thing about these statues would be that Mrs. Sonobe insisted on it being modeled after her younger self, when in reality she looks nothing like it. To make matters stranger, she equipped the statue of herself with video surveillance, a microphone, and speakers, so she can hear the local moms bashing her appearance while their children play about. To get revenge, she invites them all over for dinner and the unveiling of her new bronze statue, so she can kidnap them and have them immortalized as statues themselves after she kills them too. The Smoking Club. Kondo's friend Shirai invites him to the Smoking Club, where a group of students smoke a special kind of cigarette made from tobacco that grows outside a crematorium. When they smoke them, an ominous black smoke leaves their mouth, but strangely, it also filters out of their eyes. The story of the mysterious tunnel. 30 years ago, Goro's mother unexpectedly walked into a train tunnel and ended her own life. However, this wasn't the first nor the last person to do so, causing the tunnel to be shut down and abandoned. Rumor has it that the tunnel calls out to people, causing them to enter without realizing it. One of those people being Goro's younger sister, Mari. After finding her, their father wants Goro to keep an eye on Mari so she doesn't end up going there again, but one day she gets past them both, so their father goes off and looks for her in the tunnel, but after a while, neither of them return, so Goro goes to look himself, coming across a random research laboratory in the middle of the tunnel, where he finds Mari inside, but no sign of their father. Mari would end up going back multiple times after this, but right before the two of them were going to move to Tokyo and live with their aunt, the researchers call Goro to get Mari one last time. But something else is terribly wrong. Blood Bubble Bushes. After crashing their car up in the mountains, Anzai and Kana wander about searching for help, coming across a hut filled with young boys who attack them and attempt to suck their blood. After escaping the children, they end up in some sort of abandoned village, eventually coming across the sole occupant, who invites them in to tend to their wounds. The man tells an unbelievable tale about his former girlfriend, whose blood grew out of her body in the form of a tree with blood-filled fruits, proceeding to drug Anzai and Kana while feeding them dinner. Upon waking up and finding Kana absent from the bed, Anzai wanders about the building, eventually coming across an entire room filled with these blood fruit trees. But instead of finding the man's former girlfriend, he instead found the former occupants of the village. Map Town. Miki and Hiroshi decide to do a little spontaneous traveling for their honeymoon, ending up in a town called Shirube, which is covered in maps and road signs. After helping one of the locals, he tells them that everyone who lives in the town has a horrible sense of direction, and without all the maps, it would be impossible for them to get around. At the same time, there are benefits to living such a life, as sometimes the maps are marked with treasure. On their way out, the couple find treasure marked on the map, but after digging it up, the townspeople aren't about to let the treasure go so easily. The long hair in the attic. Upon getting dumped, Chiemi decides it's time to cut her long hair, as she grew it out to please her boyfriend, and thinks it's now time to part with it. At the same time, mice have been aggressively walking around her family's attic, to the point where Chiemi even woke up with a mouse stuck in her hair, marking that as the last straw to chop it all off. She asks her sister Eri to get some scissors, but when Eri returns, Chiemi's head is missing. Sometime after the ordeal, her father goes in the attic to check for mice, but what they find instead is Chiemi's missing head suspended in the rafters, as her hair had grown a mind of its own, and now it wants revenge. The Licking Woman. On his way to his fiancée Miku's house, Tsuyoshi is attacked by a random woman on the street who licks his hand and face. Later that night, he passes away, along with Miku's dog, who directly licked that strange woman's saliva off of Tsuyoshi's hand. Thought to be some sort of unknown biological toxin by scientists, the Licking Woman continues to attack people on the street, licking them all over and guaranteeing their death. Now, Miku and other traumatized citizens work to hunt her down. Demon King of Dust. Daisuke Shiozone lives in a massive estate with his son Yuichi and two housemaids named Nihei and Kate. He suffers from an extreme phobia of dust, which requires the maids to be cleaning constantly. And because of this, he also prevents Yuichi from wandering out into their mostly abandoned town, as he believes the town is cursed by the Demon King of Dust, wanting to prevent misfortune from affecting his family. But little do any of them know, the Demon King of Dust might already be among them. Headless Sculptures. Shimada and Rumi's art teacher, Mr. Okabe, is preparing for an art expedition with his trademark Headless Sculptures, working long into the night with Shimada by his side to get everything done on time. However, when Rumi goes to Shimada's house the next day, he won't come outside and claims he's sick, only for her to go to school and find out that Mr. Okabe was murdered the night before, making Shimada the last person to see him alive, and perhaps the killer themselves. When Rumi finally does see Shimada the following day, he's acting extremely weird and insists that not only did he not kill Mr. Okabe, but Mr. Okabe is actually still alive and wants Rumi to come meet him in the art room that night. When they all finally meet up there, it turns out those headless sculptures didn't want to be headless for very long. Mold. Akasaka is returning to Japan after working overseas for his company. In his stead, he rented his brand new home to his former science teacher, whom they dubbed Mr. Fungus, along with his family, with help from his brother Seiji. Upon going to see his home after his return, it's a complete disaster, with gigantic messes around every corner, and the whole house covered in some type of mold. As he frustratingly begins cleaning up the mess, Akasaka discovers the entire house is in a sorry state foundationally, even though it's practically brand new, and no matter how much he cleans, this mold or fungus keeps getting worse. The Supernatural Transfer Student. A new student named Ryo Sukano has just moved to town, and he catches the eye of the Supernatural Club, who study supernatural events, with two members that have supposed supernatural powers of their own. Hikaru Shibayama, who has minor telekinesis, and Kiyoshi Kitagawa, who can see people's spirits. After joining the club, Ryo starts coming across incredible supernatural events all across town that were never there before, like a field of eyeball flowers, a mysterious waterfall, and even a lake with a giant prehistoric monster. Could these discoveries be the work of Ryo, or is it merely a coincidence? The man deep in there. The only Ito project that I couldn't find anything about no matter how hard I looked, outside of being released in U Volume 21 back in 2014. If you have any information on what this one is about, please be sure to comment below. House of Puppets. Haruhiko's father was a traveling puppeteer who puts on puppet shows all across the country, also getting Haruhiko, his older brother Yukihiko, and their younger sister Natsumi involved in the puppet shows growing up. One day, their father gets ill, forcing them to rent an apartment and stay in one place for a change. He tells his kids all about how he loves being a puppeteer, because he gets to control everything they do. But Yukihiko disagrees, thinking that the puppets are actually the ones who make the decisions, running away the very next day. Not long after, their father passes away, and Haruhiko and Natsumi end up living with their cousin, before growing up and getting a place of their own. As coincidence would have it, they receive a letter from their brother after 7 years, inviting them to his home, which happens to be in the same exact town. Upon going to visit him, they find that he, along with his wife and child, are essentially puppets themselves, as they have puppeteers in the ceiling controlling their every movement. But again, as he puts it, now that he's the puppet, he's the one in control. Weeping Woman Way. Yuzuru and Mako travel to Tohoku before their upcoming wedding and come across a peculiar sight in one of the villages, that being what is known as a weeping woman, someone who is professionally hired to shed real tears at a funeral. Upon witnessing her cries, Mako begins crying as well, and to make matters worse, when they return home, the crying hasn't stopped. Now, Mako is stuck crying constantly, and the two of them decide they need to return to the village and seek out that weeping woman for help, after all other avenues have failed. The Devil's Logic. Kazumi Morimoto was incredibly happy only an hour before, but for some reason, still decided to jump off the roof of their school. A friend of hers coincidentally decided to place a tape recorder in her bag to catch her talking to the boy she likes, and managed to grab it after watching her hit the ground. Upon listening to it back, he hears Kazumi speak to some upperclassman named Kumagai, who speaks to her about the logic of death, convincing her to take her own life. Having listened to the entire conversation, her friend has been convinced as well. Where the Sandman lives. Yuji begs his friend Mari to help him stay awake, because in his dreams, there is someone who is trying to break out into the real world. Mari reluctantly agrees, but when she arrives at his home, he seems to have hit his limit, as he'd already been up for over 3 days at that point. So instead, he wants her to tie him up and watch over him as he sleeps, to make sure this dream person doesn't escape into the real world. While watching him, Mari ends up falling asleep herself, but when she wakes up, an arm is clawing its way out of Yuji's mouth. Near miss. Konishi and Kawaguchi hear the news on TV that the plane carrying their friend Takashio has lost signal en route, and maybe even crashed. Being a pilot himself, Konishi insists that they go look for the wreckage nearby in case they're okay. While in the air searching for the wreckage, they nearly get hit by the very plane they're looking for. The Village of Sirens. In a small village out in the country, the local official Hayama claims to be the reincarnation of the ancient sorcerer Dormin. And as such, he wants to release the dark secret their village keeps underneath the church. A few months later, Japan is plagued with thousands of infant abductions, hundreds happening every night. Kyoichi receives a letter from his father in the village, proclaiming that he's gotten a new job at the factory that recently opened there, and has given up all their rich farmland to do so. Confused at this strange change of heart, Kyoichi returns to the village to find the dark secret Hayama has unleashed. How Love Came to Professor Kirida. Based on How Love Came to Professor Gilday by Robert Hitchens, this story focuses on the respected Professor Kirida, as he loathes the concept of love to its very core. Upon speaking with a Catholic priest about the religion for research, believing Catholicism is based on love, he talks about a young writer named Hayama, who is trying to love him against his will, holding animosity toward her as a result. Afterward, the priest ends up talking to Hayama himself, telling her that if she does love Professor Kirida like he suspects, she should do all she can to love him, as he believes Kirida has gone his entire life without knowing the warmth of it. Soon after, Kirida brutally rejects Hayama, where she attempts to drown herself and falls into a coma. That very same day, Kirida believes he's being tormented by some sort of unseen force, even though he refuses to believe it exists. Tombs. A pair of siblings go to visit a friend of theirs who moved away to a remote village. On the way there, they accidentally run over a girl in the road, killing her. When they finally make it into the town that their friend lives, they encounter gravestones all over the road, because as it turns out, everyone who dies in this town will transform into a gravestone in that very spot as their soul passes on, but only if the body remains undisturbed. Now with a corpse in their trunk, they may have already broke that sacred custom. Venus in the Blind Spot. Professor Shono and his beautiful daughter Mariko head the Nazan UFO Research Society, but something appears to be wrong with Mariko. Or rather, something is wrong with the male members who attend specifically to try and get close to her, as at a distance, they can all see Mariko just fine, but the second she gets anywhere close to them, she completely disappears in their vision. And finally, Junji Ito's latest works. Being that these are generally released bi-monthly in Nemuki Plus within the last year, they haven't been translated quite yet. But the four most recent Ito works are Flying Saucer, an autobiographical tale about Ito's experience being encapsulated by UFOs when the concept first entered Japan. Clam Digging Fear, another autobiographical tale about Ito digging up clams on the beach with his family. Dream of a Flying Clay Doll. Yet another autobiographical tale about Ito coming up with the idea for the hanging balloons. And finally, Siren, which as far as I could tell, is about emergency sirens. But there you have it. Every Junji Ito manga explained. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching.